This happened about 3 years ago, back when I was still living alone in my first real apartment after finally moving out of my parents' place. 24 years old, stuck in a dull office job, and proud in that specific fragile way you are when you've managed to carve out something that's yours, even if what you can afford is a cheap one-bedroom in an old downtown walk-up with rent that feels like a mistake, and a building that smells permanently damp, like it's been breathing the same stale air for decades. The hallway lights always flickered, the stairs made noise under any weight, the elevator was always out of service, and none of it was charming. But hey, it was mine, and that mattered. But then, I started noticing the weird stuff almost immediately. Not the kind that makes you call the police or pack a bag, but the small inconsistencies that force you to replay your own routine until you can't tell whether you're remembering or guessing. Sometimes my front door would feel too easy to open when I got home, and at night, a faint scratching would come from inside the walls, not frantic like rats, but slow and patient, like someone testing drywall with the tip of a nail, and I told myself it was pipe settling, because that's what you do when you live alone. You explain things quickly, because the alternative keeps you awake. And then, there were the noises from the apartment above mine, which might have been easier to dismiss if they sounded like a normal person living a normal life. But I never saw a tenant or heard a TV through the ceiling, never caught the daytime soundtrack of footsteps or chairs dragged across the floor. And yet almost every night between 2 and 3 in the morning, I'd wake to a deliberate pacing, back and forth, in a straight line over my bedroom, as if someone in heavy shoes was counting boards. I could only lie there staring at the ceiling, holding my breath and waiting for it to stop. Sometimes it would go on for an hour, other times it would pause directly above my bed, and the stillness would feel weighted, like the person up there had stopped because they'd heard me move. And on those nights I wouldn't dare to even roll over. I'd keep my eyes on the same crack in the paint and pretend that being perfectly still could make me less real. I complained to the landlord once, trying to sound reasonable, and he shrugged, saying the unit upstairs had been empty for months and that it was probably just the building shifting. I remember nodding because nodding is easier than arguing with someone who owns the walls around you, but after that I started sleeping with earplugs and a baseball bat beside the bed anyway, like props in a play I kept insisting I wasn't in. One Saturday night, I came home late after hanging out with friends, around 1 in the morning, and the hallway was dead quiet with the lights flickering like always. When I unlocked my door and stepped inside, I felt it immediately. That quick animal sense of wrongness that arrives before your brain can assemble a reason. The air was colder than it should have been, like when someone has opened a freezer and left it there. And beneath the building's musty smell, there was something sharp and metallic, like old coins. I flicked on the light in the couch, the TV, the kitchen counter all looked normal. Then I saw my bedroom door was open, wide enough to notice at a glance, and I stopped because I always closed it when I left. Always. I stood listening, waiting for anything, but there was only quiet. I told myself I was being ridiculous, told myself I must have forgotten the bedroom door, and moved anyway. I reached for the light switch, and that was when I saw it, sitting on my pillow exactly where my head would have been if I'd come straight to bed. A single fresh rose, not store-bought, still dirty at the stem like it had been yanked from the ground in a hurry. Underneath it was a small smear of dried blood, not much, a thumbprint-sized mark with darkened edges where it had soaked in. That terrified me, the idea of a hand pressing down right where I would press my face. For a second, I couldn't move, and my brain did the dumbest, most human thing it could do and tried to make it normal. Maybe a neighbor, maybe the landlord, maybe I left the window, except there was no open window, and the rose didn't smell like a florist, it smelled like outside at night. I backed out without taking my eyes off the bed, like if I blinked I'd see something else there. I shut the door hard enough to rattle the frame before running to the living room, grabbing the baseball bat and standing there shaking with it across my chest, listening for the smallest proof that I wasn't alone. Nothing came, no footsteps, no creak, No breath, no pipe settling. As if the apartment had decided to be normal again, just to mock me. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat on the couch with every light on and the bat across my lap, watching my shadow shift whenever the hallway bulb outside my front door flickered, until around 2:40 a.m., the pacing started above me again, slow and careful, right on schedule. Only this time it didn't cross the room. It moved into position above my bedroom and stopped and stayed there. In the morning, and I went straight to the landlord with photos I'd taken of the rose and the stain before I threw them away, expecting the same bored dismissal. But his face went flat in a way that scared me more than shouting ever could. He said he'd check the empty unit upstairs immediately, and that was when I learned it wasn't empty at all. The previous tenant, a man in his late 30s, had been evicted months earlier for non-payment, but he'd never actually left the building, and instead had been living in the crawl space between the floors, moving around above my ceiling in that narrow, dusty gap. There was a loose ceiling panel in my closet he could shift aside, and when I wasn't home, he'd come down. The landlord found a sleeping bag compressed into a corner, food wrappers, stolen mail, and a jar full of dried roses. So many the petals had crumbled into reddish dust at the bottom, and the police said he'd been watching me for weeks, maybe longer, that the pacing I heard wasn't someone upstairs living their life, but him measuring where I slept, learning the map of me through the floorboards, trying to be quiet, and only failing when he forgot I could hear. The blood on my sheet wasn't even meant as a threat, they told me. It was an accident, a cut on his hand from crawling through the tight space. They arrested him that afternoon, and he didn't fight, didn't even look ashamed. And when he told the cops, he just wanted to be close to someone. I moved out the next week, packed everything in one frantic day, and left the keys on the counter without saying goodbye to the place. That memory was so haunted that even now I can't sleep with the bedroom door open. I still check locks 3 times before bed, and then once more when the room goes quiet. Because every time I hear a creak in a new place, my mind goes straight back to that rose on my pillow, fresh, damp, and centered like it had been waiting for me to come home. This all went down about 4 years ago, back when I was still holed up in that same cramped city studio, and by then, I'd lived there nearly 2 years, long enough for it to stop feeling like a temporary stopover. From the thin walls carried strangers' arguments straight into my ribs to the fridge's constant hum that never fully shut up to the showerhead that dripped no matter how hard I tightened it, steady and patient, as if the apartment itself was keeping time. It was all normal stuff, the kind of imperfect background noise you eventually stop arguing with, except for one thing I could never make normal in my head: the mail slot in my front door. It was old brass with a spring so strong it didn't close so much as strike, and every time the carrier pushed something through it snapped shut with a harsh metallic clap, an ugly, sharp thunk that echoed through the whole unit and made me flinch like someone had put a hand on my shoulder from behind. Even though the mail came around the same time every day and my friends laughed when I mentioned it, telling me I was just jumpy and that it was only mail. For a while it really was only mail, but slowly it became a way for the hallway to put things inside my home without asking. And sometimes it wasn't even the thunk that got me so much as the silence afterward, that brief pause where I'd go still and listen because my brain couldn't decide if what I heard was just the mail or something else. The first envelope appeared on an ordinary Tuesday, and when I got home from work, it was lying on the floor just inside my door, perfectly centered beneath the slot like someone had measured the distance, plain white with nothing on it, just my first name written in neat block letters. I stood there with my bag slipping off my shoulder and stared at it like it might move, thinking stupidly. I didn't open it at first because something just felt wrong at that moment. The look of it made me nervous, so I stood there, calmed myself down, and gathered all of my strength to reach for it. I finally tore it open. There was a Polaroid inside, and it showed the hallway outside my door at night, judging by the light and the way shadows pooled at the edges. My doormat, the number on my door, the spot where the stairwell ended and the corridor began. There wasn't a person in the photo, and that was almost worse, because the angle was wrong, low and slightly tilted, like the camera had been held at waist level or lower to keep it hidden, like someone had been careful not to appear in their own picture. And there was no note, no explanation, just that image. I stared at it until my eyes started picking out details that hadn't mattered before, like a faint scuff mark on the baseboard and a dark spot on the carpet, and the reflection of the overhead bulb glinting on the brass of my mail slot, caught in the photo like an eye. And I told myself it was a prank, because calling it a prank was the only way to keep it from becoming something else. Then threw it away and tried to laugh about it in my own head, even though I still checked my trash afterward because part of me wasn't sure it would stay gone. A week later, another envelope arrived, and this time the photo inside was of my kitchen window from the outside, framed cleanly and clearly as if taken by someone who cared about composition. The blinds were half open exactly the way I always left them, and you could see the outline of my coffee mug on the counter, the crooked magnet on the fridge behind it, even the little chip in the paint on the window frame I hadn't noticed in months. Immediately, I wanted to throw up. Who could have done this? What are their intentions? I closed the blinds completely after that, even in daylight, and my apartment started to feel less like a room and more like a box I lived inside. I told the building manager, and he barely looked up from his clipboard when he said, "People are weird, kid. Keep your doors locked," like I was complaining about noise. So I locked my door and checked the deadbolt twice, then checked it again before bed, because sometimes what you check is your doubt but your memory. The envelopes kept coming every few days, always when I wasn't home and placed where the mail slot would drop them. Except sometimes they weren't dropped at all, but looked like they were arranged, placed in that exact spot. The photos started to turn my own life into an exhibit. My couch with my throw blanket folded exactly the way I always folded it, corner tucked under and crease down the middle. My shoes lined up by the door, toe to heel, because I hated clutter. My bathroom mirror with the light off, my toothbrush in its cup, my shampoo bottles in their usual order. And then one day, I found an envelope with a photo of the back of my head while I was cooking dinner, taken from outside my kitchen window from the fire escape, angled to catch the curve of my neck and the way my hair fell when I leaned forward, and the small pale patch of skin where my collar didn't cover. At that moment, I felt my own body no longer belonged only to me, like I'd been living in a display case and someone had been quietly cataloging me. After that, the apartment's normal noises started to sound in a way I don't even know how to describe. I stopped sleeping well and lay awake listening for hallway footsteps, waiting for the mail slot's thunk, and this was driving me insane. I bought a chain lock, wedged a chair under the knob, stacked empty bottles near the door like cheap alarms, and kept a knife under my pillow. And then came the night that finally broke whatever part of me had been trying to keep this contained. That night I went out for drinks after work. Nothing wild, a couple beers and the tired laughter of people who only feel human when they're not at their desks. I got home around midnight to a hallway that was quiet with its lights flickering like usual. I unlocked my door and stepped inside and immediately smelled something different. A smell like faint cologne, warm and clean and unfamiliar, like it had been applied recently, as if someone had been here and left a trace. My skin went cold as I turned on the light. On my kitchen table, centered under my own ceiling, was a white envelope standing upright, balanced carefully against my salt shaker. My name was written on it in those same neat block letters. Seeing it inside my home instead of on the floor under the slot felt like a line being crossed, not an intrusion anymore, but a statement. My hands shook so hard that I dropped my keys. I didn't open it right away. I went to the knife block instead, like my body had taken over, grabbed the biggest kitchen knife I owned, and carried it back as if steel could fix what was happening. I used the tip to slice the envelope open, because I didn't want to touch it more than necessary. Then, what inside shocked me to the core. It was me, asleep in my own bed, photographed from the foot of the mattress, close enough to see my hand curled near my face and the expression. In the corner, there was a timestamp printed in black, 3:17 a.m. The date was 2 nights earlier. I read it again and again because my eyes refused to accept this. But the angle was too real, the kind you only get if you're standing right there in the room, breathing the same air and looking down at someone who trusts their locked door. What happened next doesn't live in my memory clearly, but I remember bolting out barefoot, still holding the knife like a child clinging to a toy, and pounding on doors until my knuckles burned and a light flicked on behind a peephole. The neighbor across the hall opened the chain at first, saw my face and the knife and the shaking. They opened it all the way and pulled me inside like they'd been waiting for an excuse to believe the building could be dangerous. And while they called the police, I sat on their couch with my knees to my chest, trying not to vomit, staring at their mail slot. When the cops arrived, they searched my place, found no forced entry, no broken lock, no sign of anyone being inside except that envelope. And then one of them opened my bedroom closet and looked up, and the small vent cover in the back, something I'd never once thought about, was slightly crooked, with one screw missing and another stripped. They unscrewed it completely, and behind it was a narrow crawl space leading into the building's utility shaft. A black dusty throat running through the bones of the place, and around the edges were scrape marks where something had been pushed through again and again. When the cop shined his flashlight into it, the beam didn't reveal a person, but it revealed what might have been worse: proof of presence. A flattened patch in the dust like someone had lain there, a torn corner of an envelope, a few strands of hair caught on a splinter, small domestic traces you'd expect to find in your own home, except these were hidden inside the walls. They told me whoever it was must have watched me for weeks, maybe longer, learning my schedule and my patterns, using the shafts like hallways, able to stand inches from me on the other side of plaster and listen to me breathe. And the mail slot, my stupid brass mail slot, was just how they liked to talk. They never caught him, partly because there were no cameras back then, and because the utility shafts ran everywhere. Basement, roof, other floors, branching into places tenants never saw. So he could have been a neighbor, a maintenance guy, someone who'd found a way in and decided the building belonged to them. He could have been someone I held the door for, someone I nodded at in the stairwell, or someone who smiled politely and waited until my back was turned. And I'll never know which version is worse. I moved out 3 days later without waiting for the lease to end, paid the penalty without arguing, left behind everything because I couldn't stand the idea of touching the place more than necessary. I just packed what fit in 2 suitcases and got out. Even now, years later, I can't stand mail slots, because every time I see one, I hear that metallic clap in my head, not as a sound, but as a warning. And I still check under the bed and inside closets before I sleep. Still close blinds even when no one should be looking. And sometimes when I wake up at night and the apartment is too quiet, I find myself listening. Not for footsteps, not for knocks, not even for the mail, but for the softest thing of all, a careful hand lifting brass. This one still gives me chills when I think about it, and it happened just over 2 years ago, when I was 25 and living alone for the first time in a small third-floor one-bedroom in a quiet apartment complex just outside the city center. A place so bland and tidy you stop noticing it after a week. For a while, it was exactly that, until I started noticing the packages. It began so innocently that I almost can't pinpoint the moment it should have bothered me. One Thursday after work, I came home and found a small brown cardboard box sitting right in front of my door, centered on the mat as if it had been placed with care, with no shipping label or postage or barcode, just my name handwritten in black marker across the top. Not my full name and not resident, just my name, familiar and casual, like whoever wrote it already knew me well enough to skip formalities. I told myself a neighbor must have gotten it by mistake and set it outside my door to deal with, and I carried it inside anyway, noticing the tape peeled back too easily, like it had never been sealed for travel. Inside the package was a single cheap black ceramic coffee mug with no logo or pattern or sticker, the kind you can buy anywhere. I laughed out loud, mostly because I didn't know what else to do, and decided it had to be a friend messing with me or someone in the building trying to be weirdly nice. So I washed the mug, put it in the cupboard, and told myself I'd forget about it by morning. A week later, another box showed up. Same size, same cardboard, handwriting and careful placement, squarely in front of my door, like the sender knew exactly where my eyes would land when I walked up. And this time, it held a pack of AA batteries, 4 of them still sealed in plastic, again with no note at all. That's when the unease began to creep in. Not fear yet, but irritation dressed up as curiosity. When I asked around, nobody knew anything or had seen anyone, and people even seemed not surprised at all. The deliveries kept coming after that, every 5 or 6 days, always while I was at work. A new toothbrush, a pair of white socks in exactly my size, and then a small bottle of the same body wash I used, right down to the scent. It started to hit me because it wasn't the item itself that was frightening, but whoever was doing this had looked at what I owned, had stood close enough to read labels, close enough to know what I smelled like. After that, my apartment started feeling subtly rearranged in my head even when nothing had moved, and I'd catch myself staring at my bathroom shelf too long, trying to remember if the bottle had always faced that way, or looking at my toothbrush in its cup and wondering if it had always leaned slightly to the left. I felt a flash of anger at myself because I couldn't prove anything had been touched, even though I couldn't shake the sense I was being watched. I changed my routine the way people do when they're trying to outpace a feeling they can't name. I stopped coming home at the same time, took longer routes from my car to the building, paused outside the stairwell to listen before pushing the door open, everything I could have to assure myself. I even asked the landlord about installing a peephole camera, and he told me the building rules didn't allow it, so I bought a cheap motion-activated camera myself and stuck it above my door frame with heavy-duty tape, pointed down the hall. It wasn't elegant, but it made me feel like at least something is guarding for me. The next package arrived on a Tuesday when I was at home due to being sick. Around 2 in the afternoon, I heard a soft thud outside my door. I stayed still for a full minute, then I moved as quietly as I could, tiptoeing to the door. When I looked through the peephole, the hallway was empty. I opened the door, and the box was sitting there so close my toes almost touched it. And when I picked it up, the cardboard felt faintly warm, like it had been held just seconds before, and that tiny detail snapped something in my brain from unsettling to wrong. I pulled it inside, locked the door fast, slid the chain, and opened the box right there in the entryway with a knife in my hand. And this time, it wasn't an object at all. It was a folded piece of paper. My hand started shaking so hard, I nearly dropped it. And as I unfolded it, a printed photo of me sleeping, taken from inside my bedroom at a low angle almost from the floor, like whoever took it had been lying down beside the bed or crouched close enough to hear me breathe, and the details were painfully familiar. My nightstand, my phone plugged in and charging, the crease in my pillowcase, my arm flung over the pillow the way it always ended up when I fell asleep without meaning to. The timestamp read 4:12 a.m. and the labeled date was just 3 nights earlier, and my stomach turned so violently I had to grip the wall with my free hand until the panic hit. I ran into the bedroom and tore through it, like the person might still be there if I moved fast enough, checking under the bed, in the closet, behind the curtains, yanking drawers open and slamming them shut, even checking the balcony even though I'd never left it unlocked. And of course there was nothing because whoever had been there had left neatly enough to take pictures. Then I remembered the camera, and my hands were clumsy as I pulled up the footage on my phone, watching the hallway feed show nothing unusual during the day. Neighbors passing, a delivery guy once, a couple walking their dog, until I scrubbed back to the night the photo was taken and my throat tightened as if the air had turned solid. At 3:50 a.m., the hallway light flickered on, and a figure appeared at the far end of the corridor, hood up and face in shadow, moving slowly. They went straight to my door, knelt down, placed the box, and then stood and looked directly at the camera, not glancing or checking, but looking, holding the stare. I froze the frame and zoomed in until the pixels blurred, and even with the hood low, I could see the lower half of their face, pale skin, thin lips, and the hint of a smile. Then my eyes caught the thing that made my skin prickle, a toothbrush sticking out of the front pocket of their hoodie, angled like a pen. My toothbrush, the one they'd delivered a week earlier. And the realization came in pieces because my brain refused to swallow it all at once. It hadn't been bought for me. It had been taken from me, and then returned to my doorstep like a joke, like proof, like the kind of gift an animal leaves when it wants you to know it's been in your space. I called the police right then with my voice shaking so badly I could barely form words, and when they arrived, they took the photo, the box, the camera footage, and searched my apartment top to bottom while I stood in the hallway with a blanket around my shoulders, watching my door like it might open by itself. They didn't find someone hiding in a closet. They found something worse, because in the bathroom there was a maintenance panel in the ceiling. The screws looked wrong, not missing but loosened and slightly angled, like someone had taken them out and put them back in a hurry. They pried it open and revealed a crawl space connecting across the entire floor into utility shafts, a narrow, dusty vein running through the building that someone could move through. And up there, the flashlight beam caught disturbed dust. Handprints, knee marks, a flattened patch like someone had been lying there waiting, along with that faint smell of insulation and old wood, and, trapped in the warm air above my bathroom, the same cologne I'd noticed the night before. That's when the pattern finally made sense in the worst possible way. The packages hadn't been gifts, they'd been messages, proof that someone could come and go whenever they wanted, and they knew what I used and wore and smelled like. And my locked front door was just a joke to them. The police set up a trap and told me to act normal. Keep going to work, keep the same schedule. While plainclothes officers stayed in the building for a few days, and I hated every second of it because pretending to be calm felt like walking around with a target taped to my back. But I did it anyway because I needed the unknown to stop being unknown. On the fourth night, the motion camera caught him again, and when he knelt to place another box at my door, the officers moved in. And he didn't fight. He just sat down on the carpet like he'd been expecting it, hood falling back, his face on the footage, looking almost relieved rather than scared or angry, like being caught was permission to stop hiding. He turned out to be the building's former maintenance guy, fired 6 months earlier for inappropriate behavior. He kept a master key and the blueprints and access to the building's hidden pathways like they were his personal hallways. When he told the cops he just wanted to take care of someone, that he liked watching me live my life, and that the deliveries were his way of saying hello. The gentle sincerity in his voice made it worse than cruelty would have, because it meant he didn't think what he'd done was wrong the way normal people mean wrong. Only intimate, only involved, like he'd turned my home into something he participated in. I moved out the next weekend without fighting for my deposit, and I threw away almost everything the packages had contained. I live in a different building now, a high-rise with a 24-hour doorman and cameras everywhere, the kind of place people look at and say, "Wow, you must feel safer." And I do, mostly, but I still can't sleep in total darkness, so I keep a low light on just enough to see the outline of the door, just enough to convince my body that if something moves, I'll know. And every time I hear a soft thud outside, my stomach still does that cold, twisting thing. Because once someone has been inside your home without you knowing, you never really live there alone again. Not completely, not in your head.